Hello everyone and welcome to Otaku Go here on the Gunpla network. Today, my cat is helping me review this figure, and we're looking at the Banpresto EXQ figurine of Shī Tsū or CC from Code Geass. This is a prize figure, so of course it's not going to be as fancy as a scale figure and may have some issues that we'll take a look at in a little bit more detail in a moment. But generally speaking, overall, she's a pretty good representation of Shī Tsū. The costuming is done well, the paint is applied well, the pose is a little risque if anything, and maybe slightly physics bending, and the sculpt is mostly on point. There are a few things that are a little finicky, but we'll take a look at those in a minute. I do have to say, out of the Shī Tsū figures I have seen, this is probably the most normal one, we'll say. A lot of Code Geass figurines get real sexy real fast, and well, some characters in the show do get that treatment. Not all of them do, and Shī Tsū doesn't usually get that too much, so it is kind of weird that most of her figurines are a little risque. Even this is slightly risque, but it is a little bit more pulled back comparatively speaking. So if you're in the market for a Shī Tsū or Code Geass figurine that's not going to be quite as sexy and more show accurate, this is a good one to look at. Now, there is one thing that bothers me about this figurine, and it is pretty much just the face sculpt, and this is something I've seen on a lot of Shī Tsū figures, and I don't understand why. I'm not exactly sure that there's anything really unique about the design of Shī Tsū's face that allows, or that makes it difficult to sculpt that, but I've seen a lot of Shī Tsū figures have really strange face sculpts for some reason. So, I don't know what that's about. It doesn't appear to happen to Lelouch or Suzaku or Colin in any of their figures, it's just Shī Tsū, so that's somewhat strange. But as we take a full figure look here as she spins around, we get to see the nice gold pinstriping all over the uniform. You get that extra little bit of flair on the cuffs as well. The little tails kind of flow back off her butt, but of course the figurine's pose tries to make that a central feature of the figurine. And you have really nice green gradient hair flowing pretty much all over the place. That is also a little weird and not really accurate, and does kind of look strange towards the top because the green gets almost like neon greeny, but generally speaking it is nice to have that kind of gradient paint on any hair for pretty much any figure. Now, the face sculpt's not terrible. I do like the little application of lipstick. The nose is fairly pronounced, a little soft in terms of sculpting, but it's not terrible. The eyes, I'm not sure if they're the issue. They're kind of like half closed, and I don't know if the eye shape is right, but the color is right, so at least in terms of screen accuracy it's mostly on point. It just something strange about it. It's either too rounded or it's too flat. I really can't tell, because from different angles it looks like it's a different problem. But once again, this happens to a lot of Shī Tsū figures for some reason. I don't know why the consistency in these errors, but they do exist. It's not a fault of the figure, it's more of the actual sculpt that is used, so kind of keep that in mind. Now, outside of that, the hair is nice. You do of course have the seam across the top of the head, but that's pretty standard fare for a prize figure. You're really not gonna not get to see that. But as we move down and we get to see the uniform itself and the unzipped front portion, we do get to see at least a nice little nod to why this figurine is the way it is. And, well, that is kind of a sexy open shirt thing. It does have the Geass scar, so that is at least kind of a anime accurate contextual reason for this uniform to be kind of open. Of course, that's just me trying to poorly justify why this exists. I didn't design it, I didn't sculpt it, but it is there, and it's kind of a nice little nod they didn't really have to put in there. Overall, the sculpt on the uniform and the rest of the body is actually really, really nice. It is really just the face. There are some inconsistencies in the pants up into the top of the uniform, in some of the wrinklings, in some of the textures that are used. The legs, the pants, if you will, are much more glossy, but since the legs connect kind of at the hips, they don't actually follow all the way through with some of the ripples in the fabric. Little strange, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Overall, the top does have some hidden features. You have a little red cape that's mostly hidden under her hair. It's kind of nice that it's there. It does also kind of help provide some support for the hair. And she has a little blue clasp, and I think this might be the uniform at the end of the first season of Code Geass. I don't 100% remember, but I think that is the case. Now, if we're looking just for consistency, since the Bakumantagatari figures had weird plasticky skin tones, I have to say this is fixed here. Of course, it's different. That's Sega versus Banpresto for Bandai. But the skin is all matte finished, which is really nice. It does help provide some contrast to the mostly glossy uniform, and it looks like what you would expect. It's screen accurate, so that's actually really nice. The gold paint is very crisp. There are a few places, noticeably on the cuff, that you do get to see some of it a little misaligned, but for the most part it's not overly distracting. This continues down into the pants, and I'd actually say the pinstriping on the pants is much cleaner. It's all pretty clean across the board, but these seem pretty uniform and pretty on point. Now, as the legs spin around here, you do get to see kind of what I was talking about with the ripples and the pulling of the fabric on the pants not continuing up into the waist. A little strange. The texturing is also kind of different. The pants are more glossy and kind of like latex or leathery looking, where the waist is a little bit more matte like the top of the uniform. A little strange, kind of an inconsistency, but unless you're really looking at something, not really have to worry about it. Now, of course, this pose does necessitate the question, do she got the booty? And she do. Code Geass and Bandai and figurine makers, posing is, I guess, their game, man. They just defy the laws of physics, I guess. I don't know what's going on here. But, like I said, this is one of the least sexy C2 figures and it's a very suggestive pose still. So it's just kind of the state of anime figurines, if you will. But I can't press home enough how impressive the pants are, which is weird to say. The texturing, the ripples, the pulls, is a level of attention to detail that doesn't really get pulled through the rest of the figure. Not that the rest of the figure doesn't look nice, but they lack a lot of those things, so that's just something to consider. Once again, most of this is not going to bother your normal, regular collector, but if you do really like to pay attention to how a figure is done, how the sculpt is done, the texturing, the different materials and finishes, you generally have an idea of what you're getting in this prize figure. Of course, with any of these, the connection points for any of the limbs, typically because they're not molded all into the same piece, are going to have some noticeable differences, like the legs up at the hips. The arms you don't really get to see too much because they're kind of forward facing, and the way this figure's posed is designed to be looked at from the side, but it is there, so if you are looking front on, you will notice that as well. But that's really it, other than the seam line on the head, of course. That's pretty much going to be everywhere in every prize figure. That's just kind of how this thing works, but overall, I'm very pleased. I have to say, out of the C2 figures I've seen, this is probably one of my favorites in terms of design. I would say there's maybe one or two other ones that I also like, but this one I think is the most consistent and at least looks kind of the most screen accurate without too many sexy liberties being taken, I suppose. The face sculpt, I still don't understand why that's a consistent problem, but it is. Bandai, whoever, I guess a bunch of people make C2 figurines, but whatever. That's just something to think about. I would say as far as my nitpicks go, well, I'm really pleased. Face sculpt, hair gradient, some inconsistencies on the materials and the finishes, but once again, those are all very nitpicky. If you just want a good, fairly inexpensive C2 figure to put up on your shelf with your other Code Geass stuff, this is a good direction to go in. There are a lot of more fashionable looking ones that take liberties of different like Chinese dresses or just regular kind of fashion stylings or even her school uniform outfit. So you have some options, but if you want more screen accurate, more kind of nightmare frame piloting aesthetic, this is the one I would say to go with. Of course, if you have any questions, do let me know in the comments down below and I will do my absolute best to answer them. Outside of that, friends, I've been the Spicer here for the Gunpla Network. Please stay safe and keep on collecting.